it's more profitable for everyone.
That there's a lack of individuals like you out there, like us. We specialize and focus most predominantly in the F&I department. And it's the exact same thing. You got to build that culture. You got to build an individualized development plan that's not a cookie cutter approach from dealership to dealership or individual to individual. And I really hope, the message comes through to a lot of dealers that haven't yet adopted it. I've got to embrace that philosophy in my service drive, because it's such a big ticket item and big ticket opportunity within every retail dealership across the country.
Yeah, it really is. There's a lot to be gained. And, we have to think big picture too, that it's not just about the profitability. It's about the long-term experience that we're going to provide by keeping our employees happy and growing. There's a lot of families out there that are being supported by these employees. And if they're feeling valued and not feeling that they have an ability to be heard and to grow, they're going to go somewhere else. And we're really seeing that at a higher rate than in my 20 years of doing this. People are being poached by other locations or just leaving to change what they do. I know multiple people that were earning six-figure salaries and left without another job. And it's not for monetary reasons. So a lot of bases with building a good culture. And the beauty of all ships rising with the tide is that the result is dramatically increased profitability. So it all ties together, but it's kind of just, anybody that's read that old book, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, it's more about being a good person and creating a good environment around you than it is. There's no tactic that is the end all be all. There's no secret. It's a lot of small disciplines practiced every day, and they work out and end up to great success.
Wow. That's fantastic. I love the book reference as well. Just so many of us have read and lived by a lot that's written in that book. So it's great. So what are some of the KPIs or key performance indicators that dealers should be looking at?
Yeah. Some of the basic ones are going to be, and some of this really is going to depend on how they've structured their pay plans and their goals in the dealership. So effective labor rate is an important one. And really a lot of dealerships overlook that or maybe don't understand it. If you took 10 service managers and said, tell me the formula, how do I achieve knowing what my effective labor rate is? Probably 7 of them wouldn't know. It's used a lot, but a lot of times the door rate is confused with the effective labor rate. And a shop will say, well, my door rate's $150 an hour. Well, if we factor in all the oil changes that you mentioned we're doing for $19.95, and it's not a thing of the past completely either. There's still some out there doing it at these prices. That dwindles down the average labor dollar that you're actually achieving per hour. So you have to take the labor dollars you actually collected and divide that by the hours that were billed on the ticket. Then you have your true effective labor rate. But dollars per hour, hours per repair order, keeping it simple, I think, is important, and picking a few to track. And they're going to vary from brand to brand. If you see an import manufacturer, they may have more repair orders in a lower dollar per hour or dollar per repair order. And somewhat that's because they have a philosophy more based upon preventative maintenance than some domestic manufacturers who might have a higher dollar per repair order, less repair orders per day, and higher hours because there's more of a repair work mix going on there. But if we focus on, let's say, dollars per repair order or hours per repair order, effective labor rate, and then maintenance penetration, that's a good starting point. You're sort of looking at how you're playing the hand you're dealt, and you're seeing all sides of it. Over the years too, the work mix has shifted from being more predominant repair. 20 years ago, 75% of the work mix at a dealership would be repair. We're fixing that leaky water pump or the mirror switch, or replacing something. Now, as a whole, it's closer to 70-30 maintenance versus repair. And some of it because the cars are being built better. They're not breaking quite as much. The warranties may be longer or different, but regardless of why, certain manufacturers or certain dealerships have adopted the policy more than others. So you're going to see a mix in what your particular dealership's goals need to be. And we can help identify those goals with a store, and also help them look at their market when they determine how they should price. You might go to a 20 group and get some information on what the best people in that group are doing, but it may not at all apply to your particular market in dealership. So you need to look at things globally as well as locally. But if I'm working with the car dealership, those are the types of things that I'm going to look at. And we need to not be looking at them once a month when the month ends. We need to be looking at them every single day, and not just looking at them, but using them in our daily coaching with the employees. And that's one of the things that's pivotal that we provide with our customers is we provide reporting by teaming up with their DMS system and getting that information to them every day. So many of these things, it's like having the process or the playbook. All the dealers have access to these numbers and to this reporting, which is sort of irrelevant because they don't utilize it and they don't look at it. And then whether they look at it or not, and whether they look at it and turn it into an action with their team are two totally different things. So we're going to help you get the right things to track, help track them for you, and then stimulate those conversations that turn into whether we're going to actually have long-term growth or not. Because looking at our benchmarks is one thing, and it's very important, but it's not going to get us very far if we don't talk about them, use them, and adjust them based upon current goals and current trends on how hopefully we're improving month by month.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. You brought up a great point. The dealers all have the information at their disposal. But I do think that there's a lack of individuals like you out there who truly understand them and can articulate it and educate a dealer in a non-threatening manner to help them improve their business. Yeah. Which is, I think, a big part of why the service department gets overlooked. Most dealers have come from the front end. They started on the show floor, they worked their way up through F&I, got to the sales desk, general manager, and they got familiar with service either through NADA retail, the dealer academy, or just kind of overseeing it, working with the service director or service manager as when they were the GM. But very few of them really dive in and understand what those numbers are. But then more importantly, I think what you bring to the table is, well, how do you move them? Here's what they are. We'll educate you. This is what it means. And it's different. You may own 5 different franchises, and these target numbers should be different, maybe for every one of those franchises. Now we're going to show you how to move the needle, and we're going to help you, gain that additional profit. And I think that that's huge. And I think it's often overlooked. And to be, candid, I don't think NADA does a good enough job speaking to it either, because it's all about the SARS report. It's all about unit sales. It's all about manufacturers. And it's very little time talking about the bulk of a dealer's business from a capital investment and a ticket opportunity, the service department.
Yeah. And NADA will do a pretty good job of giving you some of these benchmarks to look for, although they are going to be broader and more vague. But you're exactly right. The what it is and how we get there, the difference of those two coaches isn't the playbook. It's how those two coaches execute the playbook. And that is all the difference. So yeah, that's exactly right. There are too many that understand how to move the needle. It's because they haven't been trained. A service manager, more often than not, has not gotten the proper training to first understand the numbers, 2, enact the change, and 3, lead a team towards victory. There's all different styles of how to do it, but it's not a cut and paste system. It's pretty nuanced, and it takes experience and patience and daily practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look about it, one term that is thrown around a lot in our industry is absorption rate. Mm-hmm. I think it's still misunderstood by a lot of individuals. But why don't you talk a little bit about what it means and what is a good absorption rate and how that benefits the dealer?
Sure. So the absorption rate is typically defined as how much of the dealership's bills are being paid by fixed operations. So Parts and service, if you have a body shop, that will fall into there as well. But the goal is always 100%. And that means that the service department and parts departments should be paying all expenses minus the sales department's expenses. And there's another big gray area of what should that all include? Because sometimes advertisement gets dumped into a pool that is or isn't included in fixed operations portion. Regardless, the formula is gross profit divided by the total expenses that we've deemed are not the sales department. And then what's that ratio come out to compared to what your actual expenses are? So the goal is always 100%. Very rarely is it met. The good dealerships following and enacting good processes and programs do hit 100%. Some of them go over. Across the board, I would guess it's less than 75%.
Wow.
It varies wildly. 10 years ago, 8 years ago, it was closer to 55%. So changes are happening, but we go through these periods too of ebb and flow where it's been, as a dealership, the last 2 years, hard to fail in a lot of cases. The service has been there, the car sales have been there, the gross has been there on used units. So we get ourselves tricked into thinking that we're going to be setting records for the rest of our lives. And we ignore and sort of slack off on some of these better processes, especially in parts and service. So what we may find is the next time there's a big downturn, we're in trouble. We're scrambling, and now the pressure's on and the stress is on because we weren't focused on things like absorption in the way that we should have been all along. So It is an important thing to look at, but it really boils into that bigger picture of if we do the right things and check the right boxes in the way we operate, it'll come up on its own. I don't think it needs to be the end all be all. There are a lot of dealerships that look at service departments' main KPI is absorption. And it's not the only thing that we should look at, but at the end of the month, it is good to look at that. Same with policy. Sometimes people are going to really harp on policy. NADA says it should be 2% or less. We do want to make sure it's as low as possible, but a lot goes into that. And sometimes different things get piled into that pool, things like unapplied labor that can have a lot of variance, how many hourly employees you have, or what other things that might get dumped into a column on a statement. So you really have to look at your particular dealership's setup and how that statement is being organized. But yeah, absorption is a great metric, and it's one that at this 100,000 foot view does need to be taken into consideration because it's totally possible to be at 100%, but it's not common.
Yeah. And what a great place to be when dealers do achieve that mark. I mean, it really makes the first of the month pretty exciting when everything's going to be paid for and everything else is going to be gravy. That's great. So shifting gears just a little bit, no pun intended, is, we talk about, so I've been in the business now a little over 25 years, and there's been a significant shift in a lot of aspects of our industry. But one of the key ones is the staffing issues and challenges. So 25 years ago, it was hard to get qualified technicians, and that has just amplified over the years. There are fewer and fewer kids doing what you did, is, shifting practices in school and going to school to be a technician and going to a trade school. I think it's often, the blue collar worker is looked down upon a large part in our society, which I think has led to a tremendous amount of this. People don't want to get dirty. They don't want to have grease under their nails. So, dealers have really struggled with that. So where do you see that going? And what are some potential remedies, associations like NADA or state associations, dealer bodies, dealer individuals, certainly service directors, service managers, and companies like yours? What can be done to help alleviate this?
Sure. Well, it is a big issue that's plagued us for quite some time. And you partially hit the nail on the head, in my opinion, when you spoke to the blue collar aspect, the stereotype of that. If you think back in the last 20 years, mom and dad don't want to see their kids going to work at a trade job. They want to see them go to college, become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. So in a short description, culture has sort of created this problem. That both being in the culture at large and the culture within a car dealership, which when I started in the car business, and it's within that same range of 20 years, things were kind of, it was gruff. It was sort of, I wouldn't say cutthroat, but they weren't going to pat you on the back and tell you how good of a job you did. It was, you work hard and that's sort of it. You know, if you're standing around, you don't have a broom in your hand, maybe you need to clock out and go home.
Mm-hmm.
That culture, as time went on and as demand for these jobs has somewhat laxed, that plays into things as well. But when the American culture, and probably beyond, thinks about a blue collar job as maybe not as prestigious, not as dependable, not as lucrative to raise a family, over time, that really starts to decline the rates. And I'm on the advisory board for 2 different automotive colleges, and they see, just as we expect from looking at the data, declining rates in students coming into these programs year over year. Now that is currently shifting, and one of the big reasons is this shift in income, because what used to be the low income job of being an auto mechanic or being a plumber, or, you know, there's a lot of things that fall into this category. You can go without a college degree and be a technician, a service advisor, and easily earn 6-figure income now. And not only that, the demand, being that it is, creates an environment of very competitive wage. So it doesn't mean that the problem is gone now. It is going to begin shifting back now. We see these ebbs and flows for that exact reason of, 1, it's lucrative. 2, you know, some people don't want to work with their hands, but a lot of people are rediscovering, as they don't like that job in a cubicle, where they have very little control over their day, over their schedule, over their state of mind, that they would rather do something that gives them more enjoyment. And you don't know that when you're 18 years old and beginning college. If you're following a path that has been sold to you as success, is that you go get your degree, you go out into the workforce and you work for a marketing company, a tech company, a hospital, and all will be well. Really, the only thing that we've utilized to make that decision was a past predictor of income and probably dependency of having that job. Well, then you get out there and you realize, 1, you may or may not be instantly given a high salary coming out of college. You know, these days a college degree, unfortunately, is so common that it's not looked at as you really stand out. Mm-hmm. But I find that the enjoyment of the work wasn't what you believed it would have been. It's not Mad Men, you know, and you're going to go work for an advertising agency and just, it's all fun and games. So takes time, but these things are going to ebb and flow back and forth. So as that culture changes, as people leave some of these white collar jobs, they're going to migrate towards trades. And we're in the midst right now of a major shift in the way that the American workforce interacts, sort of values what's important to it. And it's going to start, you know, we see people coming from a lot of different types of trades into automotive now, for those reasons. But the second half of the problem is that if they decide to take this chance, we need to have a welcoming culture that embraces them and gives them the opportunity to come to fruition with all that they can be. And the culture in a car dealership needs to be one of a happy place to work that values and builds up his employees. It's not a job where you're going to work 4 to 6 hours a day. You might be there 10, 12 hours a day in many cases, longer than you are at home. So if we look at both of these sides, you know, that's the 100,000 foot view. You know, it's still important for dealerships to have relationships with trade schools, to have relationships, not just with the college automotive program, but the high school automotive program, and not just be on the list of people that can go to the meeting, but there needs to be more outreach and marketing. So if big companies and big corporations want to get the message out about a product or a service, they market, which used to be on television or radio. Now it's more internet or social media. Why not utilize the same strategies we are to get the message in front of potential car sales customers, to get in front of potential next generation or current generation employees to our dealerships? Some of the best dealerships in the country are going to colleges and cherry picking individuals well before they've graduated, building the relationship, getting them started, and then starting them on a pathway that they will then retain them forever. You know, Carl Sewell's group down in Texas, far ahead of his time. And his book, Customers for Life, is a great one for dealers to model themselves off of. It was written decades ago, but it's timeless, just like the How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mm-hmm.
Dealers need to be taking an active role beyond checking some of these boxes and just, I understand there's no simple solution, but we go to these meetings and, you know, you visit places and all we do is talk about the problem. And what are we doing? It doesn't mean that we have one solution that's going to work, but we have to be trying different things and we have to be building relationships and going to these career days. You know, when we don't have positions that are open, I'll go to a career fair for a college and just speak to all the students about the opportunities that the automotive industry has. They're there looking for that tech job or that design job, just to open their eyes. You know, if dealers could send, you know, a fixed ops manager or someone who is eloquent with the way that they can deliver a message to high schools, to colleges, and just say, hey, keep an open mind about what you want to do. Technicians today are less and less having greasy fingernails.
Mm-hmm.
They're tech electronic equipment, and it's only going to trend more that direction. This is something that can be fun, rewarding, very lucrative, and the demand might ebb and flow, but it will never go away. There's always going to be transportation needs. So all of us need to be taking a role in that in the automotive industry, because if we can fill some of these gaps, it's more profitable for everyone. The work is there and it's always going to be. We just need to adopt a different culture into this workplace.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that brings up another big significant shift, is the technicians of yesteryear, when you and I started in this business, are very different than the technicians today. And as you mentioned earlier, the facilities are state of the art now. You know, very rarely do I go into a service department anymore that is not just impeccably clean with, you know, all new equipment, the latest state of the art stuff. And these technicians are really computer diagnosing the vehicle's problems, and it's such a different look. And they're plugging in their laptops and they're really rewriting codes that kind of on the go. And a lot of the parts are just, you know, pull and replace. They're not tear down and rebuild. So it's a very different scale and scope. And I certainly appreciate you being an ambassador for the industry. We need it. We need more people out there doing it. I think within our cultural divisions these days, I think it's a great opportunity. A story that's not very well told is that there are these well-paying six-figure jobs readily available with minimal school beyond high school, as long as you dedicate yourself. And I think the more that gets celebrated instead of looked down upon, the less and less of a talent gap we'll have. So I just, on behalf of all of us, we appreciate you being out there and being an ambassador for it. So kind of leads me to the next phase is, you know, whenever the time frame is, right? You talk to different prognosticators, and some people will say, well, the EV, you know, surge it's going to happen next year. We're all going to be driving electric vehicles. And we all know that that's not reality. It's going to be decade or plus. But that really is going to change the preventative maintenance aspect. It's really going to change internally lubricated components failing. Certainly, you're still going to have suspension and brakes and those things. But from the drivetrain, powertrain, transfer cases, differentials, all those types of things, you know, those kind of go away in this whole migration towards EV. So what are your thoughts on that, and how should dealers prepare for what that looks like?
Yeah, and it is going to change. The timing, who knows? You know, and exactly how these things play out, who knows? We might still see some components that are electrically driven but contain a hydraulic oil component. I don't know. You know, we've seen some of that as the industry began with power steering units that might have been electric but still had a hydraulic fluid. So it will definitely change and diminish. That doesn't mean that there won't be just as many or more opportunities out there for things that will need to be maintained. Certainly some of them might be more, whether they're exterior or battery maintenance. I think a lot of things are going to shift to over the air updates, clearing out information that's stored that could be hacked out of your car, which pretty soon will be containing all of your personal information. You know, if we think about the computers, that will make its way into the automotive industry. But regardless of which way it goes and which opportunities present themselves, the best way for the dealership to prepare themselves for it is they have to, again, have strong relationships with their customers, that Ryan goes to this dealership because of that, so that when the opportunity for what our new revenue streams will be presents itself, we can actually offer and sell that to them effectively. Training is going to probably become more important than it is now in the service department, because if there are less opportunities of things to offer, one, we have to do a better job of offering them, but two, we have to do a better job of selling the reason that you're going to come to this particular car dealership. And if you're in an industry like we are, as the offerings shift, the dealership will have to shift with it. The demand will go to where the opportunities are. So that's one thing, that if our business right now has a big portion based upon lubricated components, when we find the next opportunity, the dealers are going to be open to it, because they're going to have to be. You know, this is a big shift, not just for suppliers, but also for the service departments. And the trend of a vehicle lasting longer probably will continue as well. So if that eats into how many units we're selling up front, and if there's less things that can break, and selling F&I products changes gears a little bit too, they're always all going to be there, especially because as we talk about the average car on the road being 12 years old, even if in 10 years we make the switch, we're looking at 25 years before this really, you know, it is commonplace enough in not just metropolitan markets, but rural environments around the country, where people aren't just driving longer, but they have extremely cold winters or hot summers that really at this point are still playing heavily on battery life, length of time between charges, where I can go get a charge. So as the industry shifts, the demand for these services will shift, but it will, no matter what, always come back to the relationship that we build with the customer. There's always going to be something that needs to be maintained, replaced, tweaked, updated on these cars. Even if they go fully autonomous and we no longer drive cars, we're still going to have to probably even more. Think about the checklist an airplane goes through before it takes off. They're mainly autonomous in the way they operate. The maintenance has to be scrupulous, because any small deviation could be very dangerous. We might see that maintenance increases as we go more hands-off. But again, the only way we're going to capture the biggest portion of that investment is to do a great job with the way that we create experiences and our interactions and relationships with the customer. So that will never change. And if we shift to just doing that full time, teaching people how to win friends and create great relationships, I think that will be well served.
Yeah, it's a great perspective, a great spin. I think you brought up a lot of great points that dealers will have to be mindful of as they continue to navigate this path and what that ends up looking like. Love the perspective that it may even be more fruitful because of the checklist and the analogy with the airplane and the maintenance requirements that they have there. So that's fantastic. So as we're kind of nearing the wrap up here, I'm curious. So what really does the future hold? Immediate future and a little bit more longer term future for Brandon and Total Performance Solutions?
Yeah, well, I think that our future really is going to be more of the same in trying to spread a message of the way that we can do business in a car dealership and beyond. You know what, there's a lot of sectors that can lump in with this, whether it's power sports or marine or, you know, anything where customers are coming in with a vehicle of some sort. how we can better approach the way that we do that business. There's a car repair shop on every corner in most town. It's not like a lot of other industries where there's very few brick and mortar or places to do the type of business. So if we can continue to give people a sense of, if we do this the right way, the best way for the employees as well as the customers, the sky is the limit, and it can be fun, and it can be engaging, and it can be really rewarding to everyone on all sides. That message, I think, really has a home across without borders, and we've really only just begun. We're operating throughout the Midwest states right now. To spread that message would be something that we would truly find rewarding for us. So I think that in some way, shape, or form, we're always going to be doing that. And the beauty of the way that we operate now is we do offer training and consulting on a pay-per-use basis, but because it teams so well, going back to the all ships rise with the tide, with the preventative maintenance, that if we teach you how to operate a more effective service department, it is just natural that you will sell more preventative maintenance. It's not going to be our number one focus because it doesn't have to be. If we do the right thing every time, it will raise those rates of success with maintenance penetration. So when we partner with a dealership, we don't charge them for all of this training in adaptation to a better way of doing business. We make sure that we make the right partnerships to where we see things the same way. We're both shooting for the same goals, and there's an opportunity there. And then the revenue from these maintenance products pays the bills, so to speak. It's a better partnership for longevity. It's not the typical consultant comes in for a week, gets a good paycheck and is gone, and maybe comes back periodically, maybe operates digitally through some emails, but that's not as effective as an ongoing long-term relationship where people are working together towards the same goal. And in some capacity, that will always be the way that we operate, because I think it's dependable. It's a model that could be perpetual, and it's what we're good at.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, this has been extraordinary. I've gotten a lot out of it. Hopefully our dealers will as well. I think there's a lot that they will pay more attention to in the future. And we're excited to see your business continue to grow and help dealers advance their relationship building with their client base. So before we wrap up, I've got kind of our fast five here. So 5 fun questions, a little bit off script. So the one that I'll start with here is it's a little bit fun, but it also goes back. So you've been around a long time. We talked about the stereotypes in the industry and the additives, snake oil, all that kind of stuff. So what's the biggest misconception about additives out there that you've heard?
Definitely, I would say that throughout the realm of the snake oil comparison, I couldn't count, no matter how many fingers and toes I had, the amount of not just consumers, but more importantly, technicians and longtime car guys who say additives are not necessary, are not beneficial. And none of them seem to understand that whether we're talking about an oil, a gasoline, a transmission fluid, those additives are the vital components that are helping them to operate. So you got an oil or a transmission fluid, we've got our base stock, we've got our packaging, and then we have the additives, which help to control wear, to clean, to increase longevity of these components. And in almost every case, what we're putting into the car is more of that particular blend of additive package. Now, that doesn't mean that every single brand out there is that way. Like we talked about some of the cheap products that you see at a parts store that might just be a sort of a knockoff or a fluff, a carrier fluid. But quality products with an additive package, you can just think about it like a multivitamin for that fluid. It's helping it to last longer by giving it more of what's already in it. So if a person kind of has that thought pattern, they could do their own research and find out what goes into making an oil or a transmission fluid or a coolant. They're all the same as far as looking at, we've got that base fluid, and then we've got the more important parts that help it to do its job and do it well and do it long. So that will never end. People bringing that up as an objection. And, it's funny when they are so strong on that opinion, and to ask them, what is your background in fluids that you're so positive of these opinions that you seem to hold? Some of it usually boils down to maybe an OEM or a fluid recommendation that said it's lifetime or it's this or it's that. But we have to further investigate why that statement was made. And a lot of times it goes back to a desire for that component to be replaced periodically because it's a revenue stream that generates profit for that manufacturer. So that's one of the bigger ones. This term of snake oil and the additives aren't needed, aren't necessary, aren't good, which in reality is just not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. So that's fantastic. So when I told you I had my time in service and was heavily involved in it. So I remember one time, one of my biggest blunders, and I had many of them, you cross thread, you strip something, all that kind of stuff. So I was pulling in a Corvette on an alignment rack, a Hunter alignment rack. And I kind of just lost focus for a second. I drove the car over the front of the rack. Luckily, we were able to secure the vehicle. No one was injured, all that kind of stuff. So what's the craziest thing that you've seen in the service department?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind actually wasn't in the service department of a dealership. It was when I was at school learning to be a technician. And it has some similarity to what you were just describing with an alignment rack. But we went to school at night, typically 6 to 10 p.m. were the class times. So this college operates during the daytime as well, but most of the staff and people are not there at night. It's just the automotive program. So we were learning suspension and alignments, and another student was pulling a car onto the automotive or onto the alignment rack. And as you get up onto there, a lot of times the car is left in neutral so that it can be slight adjustments made. Well, they dropped the gear shift down 1, thinking they were going to reverse to come off, but obviously 1 from neutral is drive. Hit the gas, went, like you said, over the end of the alignment rack, through the wall. But what was contained there was the main water supply for the entire building that they shattered. And it instantly flooded the entire area. But because of the time of night, there was no one there that could turn it off. So it turned into hours of the department area. And one of the great memories that I have. And as you come up in the automotive industry, there's always things like that happen. The person that's emptying a used oil vat, those roll around types that used to be common for the first time and doesn't close the valve at the top where normally the oil is able to go into the tank and sends a geyser all over themselves in the department. Many times I've seen that, but yeah, those mistakes that we make like that are great opportunities for learning. You do something like that, you don't do it again.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly glad the Corvette that I was pulling on didn't go through a wall, didn't break a water pipe, and didn't, cause extensive damage. So a great story. So now you currently reside in Michigan, beautiful state, upper Midwest, more shoreline than I think any other state in the country, including California and Florida. So if someone's never been to Michigan and they're going there on a vacation, where should they go? What should they do?
Oh man, there's so many opportunities. But if you're in the summertime, like you mentioned, you got to stay along the shoreline. I personally know the west and northern parts of Michigan better than I know the eastern side. So my recommendations, just based upon experience, would come in that direction. But pick a beach town from, South Haven all the way up to Petoskey or Charlevoix. If you're far up north in the lower peninsula and you hit Traverse City or Charlevoix or Petoskey in the summer, and you get this sort of Caribbean island experience of, these peninsulas that jut out into the just beautiful turquoise blue water, or you head up in the upper peninsula. My favorite town is Marquette, way up northwest of where we are in the lower peninsula. And you've got these beautiful shorelines and forests that are reminiscent of the Pacific Northwest. Boy, I don't know if it's just the fact that I didn't grow up in Michigan or if it's my personal interests, but I just love the geography and the outdoors aspects of our state. The best decision I ever made was moving to Michigan, I think. And I just absolutely love it. And those up north areas, that's everything to me. So I would suggest that someone go as far north as their time allows. Don't move to Marquette, because that's where I want to be, and we don't need you to crowd it up. But yeah, get out in the summer to the beach on Lake Michigan. Lake Superior is going to be a lot colder, but you can't go wrong. Pick a beach town and get ready to wish you lived there.
Very cool. That's awesome. So, so certainly you've presented, your services and products to a variety of different dealers, or service directors, service managers, and I always get a kick out of the objections people throw up, right? Because dealers particularly are in the overcoming objections business. That's how they got to get dealerships. So what's the craziest objection that you've heard from a dealer?
Well, I would have to say one of the craziest, which is also one of the most common, is our customers don't buy that. Our customers don't spend money. Our customers don't do preventative maintenance, which is just absolutely, boggles the mind when you think about, again, relating it back to who wouldn't want to take good care of their second largest investment and not have it unpredictably fail on them or cost more to operate. Especially as we think about when we offer preventative maintenance, we're not forcing anyone to do anything. We're just educating them on a good way to increase the longevity of their investment. So who wouldn't want to tell someone, hey, if you would like to keep this car for a long time, or maybe give it to your son or daughter to take to college, or not need to replace it 5 years from now, a few good things to do would be ABC in order to make sure that it is reliable. And what we find is that 3 to 4 out of 10 people, if we just let them know this is available, are happy to take advantage of it. The interesting thing that I find on the other side of that, and I've proved this out over the years, starting working at a Quick Lube when I was 18 years old in a large automotive auto mall, big Taj Mahal stores with all the best brands, Cadillac and BMW and Buick. And here's me in this little Quick Lube offering all of the customers that come through these same preventative maintenance things just because they could be beneficial to them and they may want to take advantage, of which many of them did. But once a week or so, I would hear someone tell me, I've been going to this Taj Mahal for 10 years. No one has taken the time to let me know that this could have been beneficial to my car. No one has taken the time to ask if maybe I would like to do the best thing for my car. And I'm stealing employees from these, customers from these places. So that, although it's not outlandish, get out of my shop type of scenario, it's very common. And it's laughable to me when I think about the absurdity of not allowing a customer base who may want to do the best thing for their car. And this is not just on automotive. We see it across industries. I'm a big mountain biker and I spend a lot of time on the trails or on the roads, and I buy nice bikes. And it's the same in the bike shop. I want to go in and take the best care that I can of my bike because I want it to last and I don't want it to fail me. But the philosophy is just fix what's broke. So it's not just automotive, but we just have to get ourselves out of whether it's spending with our own wallets or mindsets or making decisions for the customer. They come in a car that's not nice. We assume they don't have money and we don't want to offer them anything. We don't make decisions on people. We just need to give them opportunities and educate them. Yeah,
that's fantastic. So you're obviously well-read, do a lot of industry research, probably a lot of articles. You said you study the peer review aspects of it. So currently what's on your nightstand, your Kindle, or what podcast are you following?
That's a good question. It's usually typically quite varied. A lot of what I've been reading personally lately is more philosophy. Industry publications, there's a lot of great ones out there. I write for Fix Ops magazine periodically. That's a good one. You see people with sort of that same aspect of taking their experience from the industry to give good advice. But I like some of those old school books. Really, if I'm reading some fiction that's not, let's call it life improving, I love the old Westerns. I love Louis L'Amour. There's always something like that, either on my audiobook list or on my Kindle. But yeah, there's Edward Abbey's Desert Solitaire is one of the last that I read also that wasn't. Just a philosophical look into the American Southwest. But you get to a point where your whole life is cars and you want to step away from it sometimes at night.
Yep, absolutely. Well, that's great. Great recommendations. I'll have to check a couple of those out myself. So Brandon, thank you so much for all your time today. This has been hugely beneficial for me, and I know it will be for our audience members as well. And we look forward to having you back on in the future and continue to talk about the evolution in our industry and how things are changing in the fixed ops departments of dealerships.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for the opportunity. It was great chatting with you, and yeah, hope some people get some benefit.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Take care. Thanks, Ryan.